Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjanaya Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Bhaja Janaranjana Yashodana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijayacharya Story Shishamatas Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijayacharya Story Shishamatas Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Ananda Gadi Vaishnava Vranda Ki Nam Acharya Silaridas Thakur Ki Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaur Bhakta Vranda Ki Sisi Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Sham Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Vrindavan Navadip Dham Ki Gangamai Jamunamai Ki Bhakti Devi Tulasi Devi Ki Samaveta Bhakta Vranda Ki Nitai Gaur Premanande All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So Hare Krishna. After a long time I'm here, so I missed the temple a lot. But I thought we'll speak of, as requested, first about Raghunath Das Babaji Maharaj, and then we'll do the verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Talking about Raghunath Das Babaji Maharaj is an exalted personality. We see him on our altar just before Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So Raghunath Das Babaji Maharaj comes in the Gaudiya Vaishnava disciplic succession after the Acharya Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Baladev Vidyabhusan, who were great acharyas. He was a renowned ascetic and he was fully engaged in chanting the holy names of Krishna and also meditating on the pastimes of Krishna. So for some time his residence was at Surya Kund in Vrindavan, Vrajadham, near the temple of Surya Dev, where Srimati Radharani would go in the mornings to worship the sun god. But actually the reason was to meet Krishna, in the pretext to meet Krishna. That was the whole idea. You know how loving affairs are, that you could make lots of excuses to meet your lover. If you've been in that kind of mood at some point in your life, you'll make all sort of excuses. And I remember once there was two girls had come to the temple, and one was standing outside the door, young girl. So I asked, "Where's your sister?" So she was young, so she said, "No, the sister went with the boyfriend." So after many years I saw her again one day in the restaurant. I was reminding her, yeah, so this is like how loving affairs are, that you'll make all sorts of excuses, but that's on the material level. So also Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he comes in the line of disciplic succession after Raghunath Das Babaji Maharaj, and he accepted Raghunath Das Babaji Maharaj as his main Shiksha Guru. So we have a Shiksha line. So his main Shiksha Guru. So there's not very much information, because he lived, for some people say, for over 140 years, some say 146 years. But there is not much information about him that when I was trying to research. But interesting, just to touch on some of the subject matters that may be interesting. So Raghunath Das Babaji Maharaj had disciples, and they were in Vrindavan, and they approached Bhaktivinoda Thakur and they complained that they have come to Vrindavan, to be fully absorbed in chanting the holy names, and at the same time meditating on the pastimes of Krishna, specifically the Ashtakalya Leela. So there's a pastime, different pastime during the whole day. So Babaji Maharaj had refused to instruct them on this type of subject matter. But you know what he engaged them? What Segi does, planting Tulsi Devi. So he engaged them in planting Tulsi, flowers, vegetables to the Lord. And, something very simple, And then they didn't really appreciate it so much. So they requested Bhaktivinoda Thakur to appeal to their Guru Maharaj to instruct them into the esoteric pastimes of Krishna consciousness, the deep pastimes. But the response Bhaktivinoda Thakur gave he said, actually what your Guru did, what your spiritual master has said or instructed you to do, those instructions are right for you. So it's very simple instruction, planting flowers, Tulsi Devi, because you still have anarthas, unwanted desires. So for you to try and sit and do Nirjan Bhajan, Nirjan Bhajan means like solitary worship, and practice this Ashtakalya Leela, this meditation on the eightfold daily pastimes of Radha and Krishna, would be artificial. Would be artificial. And you'd become degraded. So that was Bhaktivinoda Thakur's response. And he said, so you should follow his instructions with full faith and work hard in Krishna's service. Then in time you'll be able to chant the holy names purely. Because it's really an effort to chant. It's not that easy to chant Hare Krishna, because you tell people it's easy. But after you take initiation, then you realize, it's not such an easy process. Isn't it? Not so easy. So eventually, Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj moved to Mayapur, and where he lived on the banks of the Ganges, and he was fully absorbed in chanting the holy names. And he had a very great reverence to the holy land of Navadvip. Although he was so renounced and absorbed in Krishna consciousness, as his reputation spread, many gentlemen came forward to give him many donations. He's such a saintly person, we should give him some donations. But that's another, it's a long topic, but I'll just, in essence, the way he used the donations was a little interesting. So once he was given some donations, and so he asked one of his servants to take the donations and go to the marketplace and buy rasgullas. Now he was a renounced person. The people were surprised, and he would eat simply, and eating simply means eating rice and dal. That's simple eating. So he said, he was quite shocked. Anyway, the servant was also a little surprised. Anyway, the servant went to the marketplace, brought the sweets and gave it to Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. And he offered it to the deities, and then he distributed them to cows and dogs in the dham, not to human beings. That's quite interesting. He said that the creatures of the dham were elevated souls and worthy of worship, service. Therefore, sometimes you may travel from South Africa, and by that time your prasadam reached Vrindavan, it's spoiled. So one day one devotee was telling me I should give it to the cows. I said, no, the cows are residents of Vrindavan. Why do you only give it to the cows? They are Brajavasis. So this is what he did. And another occasion regarding donation, when somebody gave him a donation, a very wealthy man gave him 1 rupee. And his disciple took it and gave it to the Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. But as he went to many miles, he was like traveling, he had his servant go back to the donor. He went and he returned the 1 rupee. So it's quite interesting that he returned the 1 rupee. He told the man, I understand that you have a good deal of money. I could not bear the burden of 1 rupee. And I wonder how you tolerate the burden of so many rupees. So That's an interesting way. And even as devotees, these are lessons to learn how you deal with wealthy people. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur returned donations also. The way, anyways, that's a detailed subject matter, but that was an interesting thing. But Babaji Maharaj, Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, accepted donations for rendering service to the Vaishnavas. But in this instance, he instructively exhibited his detachment, showing that one must be wary of accepting charity from the pound, shilling and pence class of men. So these are lessons to learn for devotees. And Babaji Maharaj later, he did not honor prasad unless he shared it with newborn puppies. I don't know, you all like cats and dogs and things like that anyway. Yeah. And in his old age, the eyelids would close and drooped. So he'd prevent him from seeing. So he'd count them with his hands as they would come. And only after they had begun to eat, then he will partake. And that is also a very interesting thing, because in general we're meant to serve first. But you notice that that service mood may not be there. Because I told one devotee once, I see you like to be served, but you don't like serving. So that mood of service must be there. You'll still get your quota, as much as you'll still get it. And but first we must serve the prasadam. I remember we should go to Pathasatha Maharaj on 10 campaigns. And we should do over 20, I think more than this, almost 30 campaigns for Janmashtami, or 30 programs. But we would be the last people to eat, and sometimes there was no prasadam. But we were very satisfied in serving the prasadam, and he also wouldn't eat himself. But he would make sure that we serve everybody the prasadam. Even little nuts or something we should serve. We should serve the prasadam, yeah. So he would count them. And he would say, the puppies of the Dham, they are not ordinary living entities. So he had so much affection, faith and affection for the Holy Land. But he had less affection for Mayavadis. He used to say, let the dogs come for darshan, but the impersonalists, you kick them out. Kick them about. So coming to deity worship, he was very attached to deity worship, so he wanted to worship the deities. So at Radhakund there was a stack of hay, which had been gathered there by, for the feeding the cows. So they discovered a deity of Sadbhuj, a six-armed deity of Lord Ramchandra, Lord Krishna and Lord Chaitanya combined. So the servant had the deity painted in Vrindavan, and he returned to Surya Kund where, with great enthusiasm, because it was found at such an auspicious place. So it was installed according to the scriptural ordinances, and Babaji Maharaj worshipped them for almost 10 years. So he was now, after spending a long time in Brajadam, he desired, he requested his servant to go give the deities to somebody in Vrindavan. And Bihari Das, then he proceeded to Vrindavan and gave it to the head priest of the Gopal Guru Ashram. The Lord in Sixtam, and it's worshipped there at that ashram, that Sadbhuj form, in a temple situated in a lane near Niduvan. Have you been there? I've been there, I think with Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj to this place. Late in the night we went. one evening, and they was doing Tulsi puja. Very beautiful. We were circambulating. Yeah, so that is an interesting point as with regards to deity. But he also strictly followed the vows of Chaturmas. I don't know if you'll follow that. I try as much as to follow it. Also, Chaturmas. Can speak more about it with Ramanuja Acharya. He'll give you the references why you should follow it. Yeah, Chaturmas. But he observed very strictly, because in the rainy season, it's mentioned there in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. In the first month he would just take bananas, the second month he would take guavas, the third month he would take some buttermilk, the fourth month he consumed the flowers from the banana tree. It's very simple, very austere at the same time. But it's mentioned there in the Madhya Leela, 4th chapter, text 170, about Chaturmas and how to avoid. I think by default most of us follow the last month. Urad dal we don't make so much. So urad dal is also considered like a non-vegetarian masoor dal. You know what masoor dal is? You don't know, right? Indian people know that. Nikunja is laughing because we used to make biryani with that. So masoor dal, because they're higher in protein and they considered more like meat, non-vegetarian. Yeah. So then, he stayed for a while. He was leaving Vrindavan. So the many, Vaishnavas and Vrajavasis were attached to him, and then went to inquire why is he leaving Vrindavan Dham at this very advanced age. And he very humbly and translated in depressed mood, he replied, "You can all stay in Vraja Dham because you are all pure Vaishnavas. I am very offensive, and therefore it's better for me to stay in Navadvip, because the lordships in Navadvip, they do not count offenses, as they appear to liberate all offenders. But here in Vrindavan, the offenses are counted, and the reaction thereto are strictly enforced." So these are lessons for devotees to learn from the life of Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. And then he left and went to Navadvip. But many people say, or people do say, that actually Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj was waiting, he was very old, he was waiting for Bhaktivinoda Thakur to come, so someone he could impart this realization for the benefit of humanity. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was working for the state, for the government that time, and then he transferred himself from a post in Orissa to Bengal so he could be close to Navadvip. And eventually he was posted to Krishnanagar near Navadvip. So in the year 1893, Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj was residing in Kulia, and he went to Surabi Kunj, because that's where Bhaktivinoda Thakur's residence is. It's a spiritual place. But when he entered, the whole entire grove was electrified by his arrival and appeared especially very beautiful. Because that's what happened when a saintly person enters an environment, then the whole ether changes. That's what happens. Therefore we meant to chant and dance a lot. Because, as the holy name, like last night we were chanting, last night, in the temple. And one lady told me it was not different. It was very different, she felt. So So when baby Bhaktivinoda Thakur needed some confirmation because he was studying to find the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. He studied all maps, consulted local people, visited different places, and eventually he found a Shri Raghunath ki, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Eventually he found a mound of tulsi leaves that were growing. So then he got the intuition that this may be actually the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. And at that time Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj was a renowned Vaishnava. And as he was Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Shiksha Guru, so some of the disciples, they didn't tell him where they're taking him, but they took him to this place, to the Yogi Pit. And although he was so old, maybe 140, say some 146, and the disciple carried him in a basket, but then he just jumped off. And he's spontaneously chanting, dancing in ecstasy, singing the holy names. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur concluded that this must be the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. It is interesting that he asked his disciples, to just plant Tulsi Devi. That's a nice point. But actually, Tulsi Devi, who is Vrinda Devi, one of the lines we say, fulfills all your desires. So even if you have all those desires to enter, like the disciples had, the desire to enter into the pastime of the Ashtakalya Leela, it could be satisfied by Tulsi Devi. Even if they had those anarthas, and as they're worshipping Tulsi Devi, she'll fulfill their desires. Then later, the Thakur, one of his sons, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's son, had a skin disease. So Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj suggested that he simply, roll in the dust when Lord Chaitanya appeared, and that cured him of his diseases. So Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, Samadhi is there in Kolvadvip, and devotees can go there and get their mercy. And following in the line of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Gokishore Das Babaji Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and of course Srila Prabhupada and his disciples, we can also go there and get Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj's mercy. Is it okay? So we spoke on Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj's appearance day. Was it appearance? Disappearance day. Yeah, and so I think we'll do the verse from the Bhagavatam also. I'll speak a little bit on that also. So reading from so reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 9, text number 12. Te na smaranti atitaram priyam isha macham ye cha anu adha Sutta Suhid Griha Daya Savita Daya Ye Tu Abjanaba Bhavidya Aravinda Sugandhya Lupta Hidayeshu Krita Prashanga Tena Sparanti Atitaram Priyam Ishamacham Smaranti Tena Smaranti Atitaram Priyam Ishamacham Echan Vadasuta Suhir Griha Vitadara Echan Vadasuta Suhir Griha Vitadara Yetvab Janaba Bhavija Padara Vrinda Sugandha Lubda Hidaye Sukrita Prasanga Sugandha Lubda Hidaye Sukrita Prasanga Tena Smaranti Atitaram Priyam Aishamatyam Echan Vadasuta Suhi Griha Vitadara Hitab Janava Bhavidya Padara Vrinda Sugandha Lubda Hidaye Sukrita Prasanga Tena Smaranti Atitaram Priyam Ishamacham Echan Vadasuta Suhir Griha Vitadara Etab Janaba Bhavidya Papara Vrinda Sugandha Lubda Hidaye Sukrita Prasanga Change a meter. Tena Smaranti Atitaram Priyamishamacham Yachan Vadasuta Suhi Krita Vitadara Etab Janaba Bhavidya Padara Vrinda Sugandha Lupta Hidaye Sukrita Prashanga Smaranti Atitaram Priyamishamacham Echan Vadasuta Suhi Griha Vitadara Echan Bhavidya Padara Vrinda Sugandhalabdha Hidayeshu Krita Prasanga Smaranti Atitam Priyameshamatam Yetam Vada Sutasahi Grihavittadara Yetvabjana Bhavavidya Padara Vrinda Sugandhalabdha Hidayeshu Krita Prasanga. We do the word for word. Te, be, na, never. Smaranti, remember. Atitaram, highly. Priyam, dear. Isha, honored. Matyam, material body. Behu, cha, also. Anu, in relationship with. Adha, bad. Sutta, sons. Sahir, friends. Griha, home. Bhatta, wealth. Dara, and wife. Ye, those who. To, them. Abjanaba, honor to have a lotus navel. Bhavidya, of you. Padaravinda, lotus sweet. Sugandha, the fragrance. Labdha, have achieved. Hidayeshu, with devotees whose hearts. Krita Prasanga, have association. Translation. O Lord, who have a lotus navel, every person have to associate with a devotee whose heart always hankers after your lotus feet, seeking always their fragrance. He is never attached to the material body or in a bodily relationship to offspring, friends, home, wealth and wife, which are very, very dear to materialistic persons. Indeed, he does not care for them. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. A special advantage in devotional service is that devotees not only enjoy the transcendental pastimes of the Lord by hearing and chanting and glorifying them, but also are not very much attached to their bodies. Unlike the yogis who are too attached to the body and who think that by performing bodily gymnastic exercises they will advance in spiritual consciousness. Yogis are generally not very much interested in devotional service. They want to regulate the breathing process. This is simply a bodily concern. Yadruva Maharaj plainly says that a devotee has no more bodily interest. He knows that he is not the body. From the beginning, therefore, without wasting time in bodily exercises, a devotee searches out a pure devotee, and simply by his association becomes more advanced in spiritual consciousness than any yogi. Because a devotee knows that he is not the body. He is never affected by bodily happiness or distress. He is not interested in bodily relationships with wife, children, home, bank balance, etc. All the distress and happiness which come from these things. This is the special advantage of being a devotee. This status of life is possible only when a person is interested in associating with a pure devotee who always enjoys the fragrance of the lotus feet of the Lord. Lecture. Some points we can speak on. We don't have much time. What time do you finish? 15 minutes. Okay. So the real yoga marga, the process is to control our senses, and generally yogis sit in solitary places and meditate on the four-handed form of Narayan. But in this day and age, it's not possible, it's very difficult for yogis to see the form of the Lord, because that's the ultimate goal. But what happens, people, as you're aware, engage in sitting postures, which sometimes Prabhupada says were like more or less as a gymnastic process. Last night I was reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and I found that something was really quite interesting, that how, mystic yogis, they try this gymnastic processes, and they begin worshipping from their abdomen. As it is said, that the Brahman is located. So, in that verse it says that these people are in the bodily conception of life. And to get out of the bodily conception of life is not so easy, because we've been speaking for over 30 years. You're not the body. But theoretically, at least we understand that we're not the body, and we have to work it. It's a work in progress. Especially in South Africa, where apartheid was so rife, and even up to now it's still there. And so to come out of the bodily concept of life may take some time. So as it's mentioned in that Madhya Lila, but it's a verse that's quoted from the 10th canto, I forget the chapter, but it's quoted in the Madhya Lila. So such people are in the bodily concept of life. And it's also mentioned that they are also followers of the rishi known as Aruna. And thus they gradually rise to the heart, these people, to the heart, where the subtle Brahman and Paramatma is situated. Then they worship him. But the verse says, better than these persons are the mystic yogis who worship you from the top of their heads. So it's beginning from the abdomen, proceeding to the heart, and to the head, to the Brahmarandra, or the whole of the top of the skull. And then when the person leaves his body, then he doesn't take birth again in this material world. He doesn't be again involved in the cycle of birth and death. But in the Gita we see that Prabhupada comments on the verse Yoginam api sharvesham matkatenar antar atmanaha Sharavan bhajati yomam same yukta tamamataha. And of all the yogis who worship, who have great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, renders transcendent loving service to me, is most intimately united in yoga, and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So this is the highest, and Prabhupada is interesting the way he comments in his purport. In his purport, he speaks about, now generally the yogis are meditating on the Paramatma feature of the Lord in the heart. I mean, that's what they should come to. But Prabhupada speaks about the ideal yogi in the purport. And he says, the ideal yogi concentrates his attention on Krishna, who is called Shyam Sundar. So he takes us to the highest level, who is like a beautifully decorated cloud, whose lotus face is like effulgent as the sun, who is dressed with brilliant jewels, with flower garlands, illuminating all sides his gorgeous luster, which is called a Brahma Jyoti. And he speaks about, he's the son of Mother Yashoda, he's known as Krishna, Govinda. So he's the perfect child, perfect husband, perfect master, and he's full of opulences. So he takes us to the highest point in his purport. Who is the highest yogi. So, although, people may be in the bodily concept of life, but still, there is, one can start from the bottom and come to the top. And it reminds me of the verses from the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, right up to the 11th verse, where Krishna is speaking. You have your mind fixed on him, you follow the regulative principle, you work for him or develop the desire to attain him. And then it comes to the point of renunciation, cultivation of knowledge and meditation. So it's a very gradual process. The lower stage is the indirect process of what I mentioned last. Cultivation of knowledge and meditation, engaging in some philanthropic work. But gradually you can come up and then you can fix your mind, the direct process, which is having your mind fixed on Krishna. So there's the progressive stages of devotion. But there's so much to talk about household life, and that's one of the things that's mentioned in the purport about household life and attachment to children, family, in the grihastha life. But then, whenever we speak of grihastha life, we're not talking just about materialists, but we're also talking about, when we refer to grihastha life, we're talking about an ashram. And it includes the different ashrams like brahmacharya ashram, grihastha ashram, vanaprastha ashram. Because it's not a disqualification to have a family as long as they're trying to advance spiritually. Because how will children come into the world, or how will acharyas also come into the world? The teachers, they must be father and mother. But the Griha Maidi, that's different, because their interests are different, and they're just worried about their family members. Everything is centered around the family. The word Maidi actually indicates jealousy of others, and therefore you find that Griha Maidis are very interested in family life. They are envious of others. I don't know if that happens here, but it's envious of others. So there's a difference between a devotee and the ordinary materialist. Therefore you find one Griyamedi is not in good terms with another Griyamedi. And the discussions, whatever they discuss is mainly about political, what is going on, political, scientific, social, economic matters. They're interested in hearing this type of subject matter. So much of newspapers. People just read newspapers, and after what they do with the newspaper? After reading, what you do with it? You throw it away. It's really, And there's so many newspapers. But as soon as we tell people, come and read Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, please come in here, they will not come. So there are many people like that. But factually, human life is meant to take us out from this birth, old age, disease. This is what we meant to become free from. And in one lecture, Prabhupada was speaking about the subject matter at quite a length, but we couldn't have the time to go through it now. But and he quoted that verse from the Bhagavad Gita 8:15. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion, they never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. So the process of going back to Godhead is already given. We have to hear, we have to chant, we have to associate with devotees. But also the hearing, we can hear from anybody the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, at least who's in the line of disciplic succession, and at the same time following strictly the process without any deviation. But it's actually sometimes difficult for us, even if we live in an institution, to come and hear the philosophy. Because we may consider who's speaking today. You hear of that? People ask who's giving the class. So they may consider it. But in general, it's good to come and hear anybody who's speaking. Just like that verse, where whether one is a Brahmin, a sannyasi, a Sudra, regardless of what he is, he can become a spiritual master if you know the science of Krishna. And we can learn from Lord Chaitanya that he was hearing from Ramananda Raya. But Ramananda Raya is an exalted devotee, but he was not a sannyasi. So we can hear and from different devotees and learn like that, and be conscious of that, and we can learn from anybody. But there's many things to say. The other last point that, we'll probably make it the last point, that associating with pure devotees, and specifically it was talking about the fragrance, I think it said. Yeah. Because the last. This status of life is possible when a person is interested in associating with a pure devotee who always enjoys the fragrance of the lotus feet of the Lord. So in Vaikuntha, the residents are perfect devotees, and they sometimes these fragrances is like a distraction because they feel it's like sense gratification. If they, taking the fragrance, but they are more interested in glorification of the Lord. So it may be on the way. There's so much to say about that also. We'll talk about it next time. But I thought, in conclusion, we'll talk about. It'll just take a few minutes more. It's 8:30 now. About a disciple of Srila Prabhupada who was in a botanical garden in Melbourne, and the ladies were in the back, and they're quite intelligent. They would pick up all the leaves that Srila Prabhupada walked on. So one of them thought, well, I think we should go in the front. Because Prabhupada is speaking, and they can't hear because they're in the back. So we can't really hear, so we should go in the front. And then Srila Prabhupada took a leaf from the tree, he crumbled it and he smelt it. And he asked, what kind of tree is this? And the devotee said, this is Srila Prabhupada, it's a camphor tree. And Srila Prabhupada said, oh, this is Radharani's favorite fragrance. But what I learned from that they were more interested, they had this realization that to hear to Srila Prabhupada, because hearing is the process. And they had that opportunity to get that information that this was Radharani's favorite fragrance. But that you can get from a pure devotee. So therefore the association of a pure devotee is important. And yesterday listening to the class, I just want to read what Prabhupada said. When I was here, I took a note of it. We cannot do that. Is it that very difficult thing? If we hear patiently with a little attention and hear Krishna's words, what Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita, what he has spoken about Krishna in the Srimad Bhagavatam, simply if we hear, we don't require any qualification, any education, any PhD, MST, I don't know what that stands for, but this and that. No, simply Krishna has given you ears so you can hear. What is the difficulty? Krishna is so kind. If you simply become a little inclined to hear about him. So there are, different types of hearing, and that's another discussion on its own. There's incidental hearing, there's specific hearing, purposeful hearing, there's different types of hearing. And as we read the scriptures, we can dive more deeply into Prabhupada's words or whatever he had written. So we get his association, and we can one day become very deep devotees. And we may be concerned of the body, and it's true we have to be, and we have to take care of the body to render service. But Prabhupada said in this one lifetime we should make it and go back to Krishna. So it's possible in one lifetime. And he also said, we don't have to worry about what we were before. Whether we are bad people, whatever type of persons we've been and engaged in sinful life, we don't have to worry about that too much. But in this one lifetime we can make it. He said, if the devotee is not ready, then he extends the life. too concerned about it. So we can surrender more to Krishna, chant the holy names, and take to Krishna consciousness in a more deeper way. It will be very nice. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Any comments or would you like to raise anything? It's 25 to now, so.
Thank you, Raghunath. I was thinking about that point you were making on how important it is to hear, and how sometimes if we're still on the bodily concept, we may consider who is speaking and what. But actually, Krishna can speak through even the most unlikely people. I was thinking of the example of Chintamani and
Bilvamangala.
Yes, Bilvamangala. She was probably the most unlikely person. You wouldn't expect that his spiritual master would speak through her, yet he did. So we have to be careful to really try and hear when Krishna is trying to speak to us, and that can come through anyone actually. We just have to be careful to hear. And then what to speak of devotees who are sincerely practicing. Of course, we can learn so much from them. And we were reading on Sunday on the Nectar of Devotion, in the Nectar of Devotion, that in order to be eligible to practice devotional service, we need to actually rise beyond that bodily concept of life. And then also in the previous purport to the one we're reading today, Prabhupada explains that it's not possible for us to make any progress in Krishna consciousness unless we actually take shelter in Sangha of the devotees. Yeah, so I think those points all link. Thank you so much for the class.
Yeah, it's interesting that when Srila Prabhupada came in 1975 to South Africa, and he was speaking at the University of Durban, Westville, and Professor Oliphant was there. And Professor Oliphant understood what Prabhupada was saying, but he was an African and came from a white background. But the Indians were also there. They didn't have that understanding as Professor Oliphant. So it's anybody can come to that understanding, especially when listening to a pure devotee, and to come out of that bodily concept of life. Yeah, it's quite an effort. It's definitely an effort. And Prabhupada, he's speaking about nectar of devotion, and Prabhupada sometimes would be speaking on nectar of devotion, but soon as somebody just like milling around walked in, he would switch his discussion, because the people were on the lower level, on the bodily concept of life. The nectar of devotion means mainly for devotees. Thank you. Anybody else would like to say anything? Thank you. Okay, so I took more than 5 minutes. Sorry, but thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.